October 18, 1997. 1:48 a.m. Roscoe's Male Strip Club, Bala, Ontario. Darlene and Karen were having dickens of a time but were running out of dollar bills fast. They decided to take a break and made their way to a table to talk. So, anyway, I told Fetty that our relationship was special to me and that I'd be willing to leave Theron for him, Lo Pepper was saying. So that's why he left, exclaimed Karen. Yeah. I guess I was too much of a woman for him. Not the first time that's happened. So, how's about you, Karen? Any extracurricular activities? Well, there was this man named Irving but he was blind as a bat and couldn't keep up with me. So the graffiti in the men's room at DOA is true, thought Darlene to herself. Wada ya say we sober up here and then head out for the Bala Forest and our destiny, said Lo Pepper after a moment's silence. I've got $25 left. Let's get rid of that first, said Karen, a gleam in her eye. The women giggled, let out a woohoo, and rushed back to the stage. October 18, 1997. 2:08 a.m. U.S. Air Force aircraft, somewhere above Bala, Ontario. The pilot turned to the gunner and sighed. I don't suppose this is Saudi, he said dejectedly. I just don't care anymore, yeah no. We've been doing this for what seems like forever. I think we should just give up and go home. Besides, I have to pee real bad. Agreed. And when we get back, I want to see President Bush personally. The men nodded and the pilot began setting course for Washington. Suddenly, the aircraft was bathed in a purplish light. The men covered their eyes in shock. Their bodies began to shimmer, and they disappeared. The aircraft hung in the air for a moment and then, without anyone to pilot it, began plummeting towards the ground. October 18, 1997. 1:51 a.m. The forests of Bala, Ontario. Tip heard a strange sound and looked up in time to see something shooting across the night sky towards the horizon. He saw and then heard a huge explosion of fire and smoke. Anne was at his side immediately. What is it? She questioned. Let's go find out. 35 minutes later they reached the crash site. Tip and Anne scoured the ground for signs of survivors or even dead but found nothing but flaming wreckage. Tip suddenly froze. Anne asked him what was wrong. He pointed at a piece of wreckage. It bore a U.S. flag and call numbers. Troop 856. This is not good, he said, deathly serious. October 18, 1997. 2:29 a.m. Somewhere over the forests of Bala, Ontario. The pilot and gunner were cowering in fear under a bright purple light in a large circular chamber with no signs of exit. What's going on? Said the pilot. As if I know, snapped the gunner. The pilot put his hands on his hips and said, well, don't get bitchy with me. A chime sounded. State your names, said a voice, gender neutral. The pilot and gunner looked at each other nervously. Air, they both stuttered. State your names, repeated the voice, more forceful this time. I am Corporal Bobo Bobolewski, said the gunner, blushing. And I am his brother Lulu Bobolewski. The voice chuckled. Well, Mom thought I was gonna be a girl and was a little nearsighted, and it wasn't until the circumcision that she realized I was a boy. By then, it was too late to change the birth certificate, said Lulu indignantly. You shall aid me in my plan, said the voice. Who are you? Demanded the men. I am called TR. But the forces that gave me my title were confused and chaotic and unable to fully understand what they had created. I will now show them and everyone else just what I can do. You're not going to break into song, are you? Asked Bobo. Oh, sniffed the voice, I guess not if it's going to offend you. The men looked at each other uncertainly. October 18, 1997. 3:16 a.m. The forests of Bala, Ontario. Tip and Ann sat at the makeshift campsite they had made. Tip has been quiet during the trip back from the wreckage and refused to answer any of Ann's questions. They both jerked up when they heard a twig snap. "Who's there?" shouted Tip. A net fell from the sky and covered them. Two figures dressed in black from head to toe converged on the captured Tip and Ann. The larger of the two snapped Tip's head up and said, with a sneer, "I am Darlene Lopepper and you are my prisoner." She cackled with glee. October 18, 1997. 3:48 a.m. 5:14, Sinister Way, Bala, Ontario. The man heard a knock at the door and shuffled across the marble foyer to peer out the peephole. A group of people stood outside, grinning, waving and making silly faces. The man smiled and opened the door, letting the group in. "Jimmy. Carla. Everyone. Hello. Ya came to Bala? Is this your first time in Bala? It couldn't have been your first time in Bala? I remember my first time in Bala, it was back in 1963, or was it 1965? Sir, I do not know your name or your intentions, but I must implore you to please help us," said Jimmy in the most serious tone he could muster. The man was silent. He then nodded and said, "The summons. Yes, I felt it too. We think it has something to do with TR," said Brian. "I'd be surprised if it didn't," agreed the man. "Good sir, before we get into all of this, I am curious, how did you escape the firing squad in Paris?" chimed in Batman, pushing his way to the front of the crowd and pushing out his chest. "Well, ya remember that Terminator friend of yours? Oh, ya must remember him. We met back in 1992, or was it 1991? Anyway, just as the bullets were flying through the air, which reminds me, did I ever tell you about the man in our regiment who has such bad pimples, he got shot and—" "We remember," the group shouted. "Well, anyway, I was standing on this manhole, though I imagine they call it something French over there, like La Man du Hole or something. Icy stairs. The manhole cover slid back and I found myself falling down, saved from certain death at the firing squad's hands. I was mighty pleased, I can tell ya that. I was quite anxious to thank whoever saved me and imagine my joy when I sees it's your Terminator friend. Turns out he also had a mission to kill that Jerry Lewis fella, and since it was France and all that, he figured that would be a good place to start. We spent several months, don't you know, down in those sewers. Eventually, the Terminator fella took off for greener pastures, and I made my way back to America and my teaching job at BTC. Well, there's a student there by the name of Tony, don't you know? Gets on your nerves. We can only imagine," sneered Carla, obviously bored and applying hairspray. "Anyway, he kept getting in my face and talking to me and wouldn't shut up. Drove me bonkers. I ended up going crazy and, in an institution, here in Bala. Couldn't speak a word, I was so crazy. Then, 8 days ago, I snapped out of it and moved back home. I knew something was up." Al turned to Brian and said, "Oh. This explains so much." "Yeah, but don't you think he spent too much time talking about it? I mean, come on, it did drag out a bit, and to be honest, I was getting bored. It wasn't even very funny." "Well, we can't be funny all the time," pouted Al, turning away. October 18, 1997. 4:18 a.m. Several yards away from 514 Sinister Way, Bala, Ontario. Karen was adjusting her infrared nighttime goggles and gave the thumbs up sign to Lopepper. They were looking at the house in front of them. They had seen the small group go inside and they knew it was now or never. But they were also aware of the fact that it was 2 against 6 plus 2 superheroes. The odds weren't good, but Darlene liked a challenge. That, and the fact she had several grenade launchers strapped to her back. On the count of 3, she whispered. Karen lifted the rocket launcher to her shoulders with a grunt. 1. Karen activated the personal body armor on her suit. 2. Darlene did a quick check to ensure her rifles were secured firmly to her legs. 3. The two-woman army charged the house and stopped at the front door. A note hung there, flapping in the wind. Lo Pepper stepped up and read it aloud. Gone to Bala Forests. Back in a bit. Karen fell over from the weight of the armor. October 18, 1997. 4:26 a.m. The forests of Bala, Ontario. Who did this to you? Demanded Jimmy as he untied Tip and Ann. Some crazy fat woman, replied Tip, rubbing his wrists. Must be Lo Pepper, said Al and Brian in unison. Their brows furrowed with concern. Agreed. That wench will stop at nothing to defeat me. But who is this she has recruited to her evil cause, said Jimmy. I do not know. But I did see some of her handwriting and man, was the slant screwy. That would be Karen Marango. Despaired Al. But Mrs. Marango isn't a bad apple. She's helped us before, said Carla. Yeah, but ever since Tom turned Greek Orthodox, she's been a little screwy in the head, spoke Brian, explaining much. Holy double trouble. We have two enemies, TR and Lo Pepper, said Robin. Thank you for stating the obvious, Boy Wonder, sneered Batman. Robin was suitably shunned. Yes, thank you Boy Blunder, said a shrill voice. The group turned and saw a sweaty Lo Pepper and decidedly tired Marango standing at the edge of the clearing. You evil fiend, exclaimed Batman, stepping towards Lo Pepper, hands moving towards his bat belt. Lo Pepper whipped up a straw to her lips and blew. A small dart with neon yellow feathers shot out and stuck in Batman's gut. He said eek, and fell over. Anyone else feeling brave, she threatened. The group merely grumbled and shuffled their feet. I don't really care about the rest of you, intoned Lo Pepper sarcastically, it's Jimmy I want. He's caused me too many problems and I'm out for blood. Are you challenging me to a duel? Spoke Jimmy bravely. Lo Pepper slipped out of her cloak, revealing a skin-tight spandex black and red striped suit. She pulled out two long wooden sticks with curved blades on each end and tossed one to Jimmy. You want a piece of this, she said, taking up a defensive posture. Jimmy took the weapon and stepped towards Darlene. Robin held back a weeping Carla, who was struggling to stop Jimmy. The two warriors circled each other, occasionally taking a swing at the other. Each swing was met with a duck or jump. Jimmy made a lunge to spear Lo Pepper in the midsection, but Darlene jumped high above the jab. She came back down, left foot extended, kicking Jimmy in the chest and sending him sprawling. Jimmy recovered just in time to see Lo Pepper about to bring her spear down for the killing blow. He brought up his spear and blocked her. He brought his feet up and pushed her away. She stumbled back and almost fell over. Jimmy took the advantage and rushed her, screaming bloody murder. But Lo Pepper was quick. She dodged the spear and used her considerable weight to ram Jimmy and once again knock him off his feet. He lay on the ground, gasping for air. Darlene gave an evil snicker, raised the spear and brought it down, with nothing to stop it from splitting Jimmy's head wide open. Jimmy shimmered and vanished. The spear struck the forest floor. Darlene spun around and called out defiantly, "You can't escape me, Jimmy Sr." October 18, 1997. 4:57 a.m. Somewhere over the forests of Bala, Ontario. Jimmy materialized in the circular chamber, crouched and awaiting death. He realized it was not going to happen today and looked up uncertainly. He saw a bright light above him and heard the soft sound of laughter. "TR," he called out. "Very astute," replied a voice. "Who are you?" he demanded. "Wouldn't you like to know?" "Well, that is why I'm asking." "Oh, yeah, Good point. Silence. Well, spoke Jimmy. Yes. Who are you? Oh, that. Sorry, can't tell ya right now. Maybe later. Jimmy rolled his eyes in disgust. So what do you want from me? He questioned defiantly. Ya got $1 I can borrow. What? Just kidding. Silence. I've been watching you for a long time, Jimmy. I've followed many like you. It started with Mary Lou and then that fool Tom. I even recall briefly some chick named Ingrid. She never worked out. Yeah, duh. So what's your point? Do you recall two misfits who were constantly fighting a war which ended long ago? They seemed to follow you everywhere you went and showed up at the most inopportune times. Troop 856. Yes. Were they your lackeys? No, but I thought I might freak you out if I brought them up. It's just a weird coincidence, that's all. This is getting tiresome. Yes, well, anyway, I have captured those two misfits and am now using them to further my plans. Now, said plans need a little more work, but I'm sure it will come to me eventually. In the meantime, I need you and your motley little band of followers to do something for me. What? Long ago, your two friends Brian and Al fought a duel with an ancient weapon, though they did not realize at the time that what they used was an ancient weapon. It is cleverly disguised. Jimmy tensed. He knew what TR was talking about. He and Carla had found what had looked like a light cover for one of the students' desks in the rubble of DOA when it burned down. He had wondered at the time how it had survived the fire, but now he knew. I don't know what you're talking about, lied Jimmy. Jimmy's body was suddenly racked with intense pain. He screamed and fell to his knees. The pain subsided. Don't play dumb with me, Jimmy boy. You know what I mean. All right, but why do you need us? Silence. An uncomfortable silence. Your life, Jimmy, is quite complicated. After the incident in Paris, which I saved you from, by the way, your life and the lives of your friends becomes quite fractured. I have lost count of the number of separate paths you and similar versions of you have taken. I was forced to finally disrupt the flow of time and return you to this time. That's why everything after Paris seems so muddled to you. You are remembering several different lives? All of this has caused severe temporal damage. And in that damage, the weapon and the booster elements have become lost. I want you and your little friends to find and return them to me. And if I say no? Do you know how many times I saved your ass? Remember that incident with the octopus? You've been manipulating me. Yes, in hopes you would find the weapon. But you seem to have this knack for doing so much yet so little. It's like you get yourself into a situation, get bored with it, and then just take off and pretend it didn't happen. Most frustrating. You have a point. I will divide you into teams. Each team will scour the time zones until you find the weapon and parts and return it to me. The weapon itself is easy enough to spot, the other parts are more cleverly disguised. One is an alligator and the other a, Yes. Well, a brazier. You mean an over-the-holder boulder holder? Yes. Okay. I guess. Sure. Why not? I will divide your group into teams. Good hunting. October 18, 1997. 6:51 a.m. The forests of Bala, Ontario. Jimmy shimmered and reappeared in the clearing. The group turned to face him. Their faces were ashen. We saw your conversation with TR, said Brian. Yeah, it was like Star Trek when the crew would watch Captain Kirk on the view screen when he was doing battle with some alien creature, said Al. God, does everything have to be Star Trek this and Star Trek that with you, goaded Low Pepper. Al shot her an iniquitous look. So when does this begin? Asked Robin, tugging on Batman's cape and hopping from foot to foot. There was a brilliant flash of light and the group, minus N, vanished. "Hello," she said aloud. "You wouldn't get it?" said a voice. "Oh. Okay. Team 1, Jimmy, Low Pepper, Batman, Trudy." Jimmy and the rest shimmered into existence on a street corner. The first thing he saw was himself. And Carla. They were standing across the street, in the smoldering rubble of DOA, fishing about for something. He knew that the weapon was there. "Well, this will be easier than I thought," he said, moving towards the rubble. "Wait. If you meet yourself in this time period, you risk altering the time flow and therefore destroying the web of time." "Does everything you say end with an exclamation point?" snorted Trudy. Batman's lower lip quivered, and he turned away, sniffling. "Since when did you learn how to use proper pronunciation, Ms.? We're student council, so let's use student funds and go get drunk at Applebee's." Trudy's eyes narrowed. "Don't make me summon the pack, Marango," she warned. Jimmy motioned them to be quiet. He had just heard himself make some comment to Carla about going to Washington, D.C. and then walk out of the rubble, into Carla's papa's Porsche and race off. He ran across the street and saw the weapon laying in the rubble, ready for the taking. "Don't move," commanded a stern voice from nearby. Jimmy spun around in shock to find himself being covered by a bazooka. He looked up and saw who held it. Bob. Bob was surrounded by a group of khaki-clad boys. Jimmy saw one of them wearing his coat. Bob was frowning with confusion. "Do I know you, stranger?" he asked cautiously. "Yeah, in about 4 years, you're going to score some pot from me. Except that I'm an undercover policeman and I haul your ass into jail," replied Jimmy evenly. Bob sneered. He didn't seem to care. All he cared about was blowing Jimmy to bits. His finger was tightening on the trigger. "Batman. Help," he squeaked. Team 2, Carla, Galileo, Robin, the man, Tip. They shimmered into existence in a parking lot behind a decrepit-looking building. Robin began to squeal with joy. "It's Jerry's Hamburgers," he exclaimed, jumping up and down. "Why are we here?" asked Carla, obviously disgusted at the sight of the building. "Maybe we need to get jobs here and find out," said Galileo sagely. "Me? Carla Whipperforth, work at Jerry's Hamburgers for minimum wage? And wear that geeky uniform Al used to wear? Hey, maybe I can sell them a porta-potty," chimed in Tip, rubbing his hands together in earnest. Robin gasped and pointed. The group looked. Robin, the earlier Robin, who had just been unceremoniously dumped by Batman and left to fend for himself, was getting out of his Bat Pinto and walking towards the entrance. He was obviously beginning another night shift at Jerry's. "We need to get in there and see what's up," said Tip excitedly. "Robin. Knock yourself out," exclaimed Carla. "Huh." Carla rolled her eyes and ran over to where the other Robin was about to enter the restaurant. He looked up at her and grinned from ear to ear. "Carla baby. Come to daddy." Carla smiled sweetly, pulled the volleyball she always kept handy out of her purse and threw it at him. He was out cold instantly. She motioned the group over and they stripped the old Robin and gave his uniform to the current Robin. Robin was just giggling. He had never seen himself naked before. "Now get in there and see what's up," ordered Carla. "Okie dokie," he said, walking up to the side door and going inside. "Gads, what else could go wrong?" exclaimed Tip. The man suddenly said eek, and pointed. The group turned, their jaws dropping. Across the street and moving determinedly towards Jerry's was a woman with an alligator. "Finkel," spat the man.